All right, quick discussion of how to do the problems on quiz 2-3. What's the midpoint of AD? Only B, because only B is exactly in the middle of A and D. It's 2 units from A, it's 2 units from D. Which point is 2/3 of the way from E to I? From E to I is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 total units. 2/3 of that would be 4 total units, and there is no point that is 4 units from E towards I. Right? This is 1 unit, this is 2 units, this is 5 units from E towards I. There is no point that's 4 units. Midpoint between F and B is point I. Why is that? F is the midpoint between B and I, because F is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units from B, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units from I. All the segments, this year on the quiz, I changed this to 9 units long, and there were 2 segments that were 9 units long. I believe they were BH and CI. Hey, everybody, you don't need to give me 2 different names for the same segment. Once you've said BH, you don't also need to say HB. Totally unnecessary, all right? I didn't ask for all the possible names of segments. I asked for the names of all the segments, and HB is the same segment as BH. It's just a different name, okay? Midpoint of the diagram above is, oh, by the way, I warned you, if you left segment bars off of these names, I marked them wrong, okay? You got to put segment bars above segment names. Otherwise, it's not a segment name, okay? If you left the segment bar off down here, I might have let that slide. If you put the segment bars up here, E is a midpoint of segment AD because of these congruent marks. C is not a midpoint of anything in this diagram, right? It's the same distance from B as it is from D, but that doesn't make it a midpoint. A midpoint of a segment must be on that segment, okay? I think everybody got this right. Let's look at these problems here. The midpoint of RC would be halfway in between. It would be right there. Those coordinates are 7, 14. L is the midpoint of KZ. So L is in the middle of Z and some other point K. K must be over there somewhere, and it's got to be the same distance from L as Z is, right? And so from Z to L, we go up 2 and over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we got to go up another 2 and over another 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in order to find K. And its coordinates are 9, 8. Hey, those of you who are not writing the parentheses around your ordered pair, stop doing that. That's sloppy math. Ordered pairs should always have parentheses around them. I let it go this time. I might not be so nice in the future. Q is 2/3 of the way from M to W. 2/3 of the way. Well, probably the easiest way to do this problem is to realize that this segment goes precisely through that point, that point, that point, that point, and that point. And so from M to W is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 equally spaced steps in that diagonal direction. 2/3 of 6 steps, sorry you didn't see me write that down, 2/3 of 6 steps is 4 steps. So if we go back to M and take 4 of those steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, we will locate point Q exactly. And then the coordinates are 23, 11. Okay. Let's turn to the back side. In the diagram above, H is halfway from T to J. Now, I drew a segment from T to J. You don't have to do that to locate T to J. I was just trying to give myself a visual idea of approximately where H should be. But to calculate its coordinates precisely, I used the midpoint formula. Okay. Here's the x coordinates of T and J, 12 and 20. Add them up, divide by 2. Here's the y coordinates of T and J, 18 and 0. Add them up, divide by 2. That's what produces the values 16, 9. So there's H. Now the question asks, how do you get from V to H? From V to H, we're traveling in this direction. northeast, not the other way. Okay. So we're going from an x-coordinate of 12 to an x-coordinate of 16. That's 4 blocks in the east direction to get from 12 to 16. And then from a y-coordinate of 4 to a y-coordinate of 9, that is 5 blocks in a north direction. So final answer, 4 east and 5 north. You could have written those in the opposite order. It doesn't matter. 5 north and 4 east. That would have been worth full credit too. If you located H correctly, showed me in your work that you got the correct coordinates for H, you got a point for that, even if you didn't get the final answer correct, because this problem was worth 2 points. Next 3 points, 11, 12, 13. I want to emphasize here the easiest way for me to explain how to do all 3 of these problems with a method that is reliable, works every time, is the midpoint formula. Okay? If you add up the x-coordinates of a couple of endpoints, you get the x-coordinate at the midpoint. And if you add up the y-coordinates of the endpoints and divide by 2, I think I forgot to say that with the x's, you'll get the y-coordinate of the midpoint. Using these formulas makes all 3 of these problems very straightforward. Okay? So in problem number 11, I gave you the coordinates of the endpoints. So if you just plug the 12 and the negative 50 in for these x's, divide by 2, you get the x coordinate of the midpoint. If you plug this 38 and this 104 in for these y's and divide by 2, you get the y coordinate of the midpoint. Could not be any easier. Okay? This problem, you can do it the same way. And what I mean by the same way is plug the values in their proper places in the formula. It's just that some of these numbers go in different places, right? Now, here's what I did. I rewrote the coordinates of D here, and the coordinates of E here, and then F here, and I called those just X and Y. They're the missing numbers, right? And I rewrote them so that it's clear to me that E is the point in the middle, which is what the problem says here. E is the midpoint, and F is on the outside. So now, you put 9 and x into these 2 places in the formula because 9 and x are the endpoint coordinates. X is not the midpoint coordinate in this problem, right? 9 and x go in here, and the negative 36 goes in here. And that's what I've written right here, okay? Just plug stuff from the formula in the proper places in the formula, and then the rest should be easy. Multiply both sides by 2, right? And then subtract 9 from both sides, and you got your x coordinates. Same thing with the y's. Plug the endpoint coordinates, 42 and y, into the right places for endpoints in the formula. Plug the midpoint coordinate in the spot for the midpoint value. Multiply both sides by 2, subtract 42, and there you go. Okay. I have to say right now, there were quite a few people who were coming up with this answer, 80, negative 80, positive 140. That's so close to being the correct answer. The y coordinate is right. The x coordinate is off by 1. Here's the problem I had with just about everybody. I think every last person who came up with this answer. Both of these numbers were appearing out of thin air. Nowhere in the work of people who came up with this answer were you showing me how you got either one of these numbers. And in fact, this number is completely wrong. It appears out of thin. I know it's close, but it's wrong. And nowhere were you showing me how you got this number. Here's what I'm convinced of, because so many people gave me this answer and showed me the same work. Your work looked the same. The answers were appearing out of thin air. I am convinced that one person got these wrong answers or got this wrong answer here anyway. All right. And then that person talked to a whole bunch of other people. A bunch of other people copied down this person's work, had no idea what they were doing. Okay. And you probably got no credit for this problem at all, even though this is the correct Y value, because people were not showing me how they got this Y value. And I'm convinced you don't know where that Y value was coming from, other than somebody else's paper. Okay. Number 13. Another midpoint problem where, again, you can use the midpoint formula, okay? And in this particular problem, the way it's laid out, M is in the middle of L and R. That's what it says here. M is the midpoint of L and R, right? So take the end point X coordinates, the K and the P, and plug them into the formula where the endpoints go, which is here, K plus P divided by 2. Take the negative 13, which is the midpoint X, and plug it in that spot for the midpoint. So here's an equation, which we can't really solve either for K or for P yet, but we will if we keep working through the problem. Take the Y endpoint values, which are P and 16, plug them in here where the endpoint coordinates go, divide by 2, and that should produce the midpoint coordinate, 74. This equation can be solved for P. Multiply both sides by 2, subtract 16, you get an answer for P. Now you can take that P value, plug it into this equation, which I did right here, and then multiply both sides by 2 and subtract 132 to get your K value. So again, I say all three of these problems can be solved by plugging the information you've been given into the proper places in the formula and then just doing whatever algebra you need to do to finish the problem. And that's the easiest way for me to explain how to do all these three problems. Now, there were some people who solved these two problems by a different method, a method that makes sense, that I've even talked about, and you might even think those methods, this alternate method, is a little bit easier to perform. And I'm not going to argue with you about that, okay? But I think that other method that I have talked about in video in the past is not as easy to explain, okay? So I'm going to urge those of you who are making mistakes on any of these problems to adopt this formula approach to doing all these problems. But if that just continues not to work for you, and you want to try to understand some other way of doing these problems, arrange a one-on-one meeting with me, and I'll take whatever time I need to work through those with you. Last problem. A lot of people came up with the correct answer here and did not have good work showing me how on earth they got this answer. Here's a good picture for this problem. D is the midpoint of AC, so it looks like the midpoint. And look, I marked both of those segments with an X. Okay. Now C is the midpoint of AB, so C is the same distance from A as it is from B. Well, how far is it from A? It's this X plus this X. So it's 2X from A, which means it's got to be 2X from B. Right? And then finally, BD is 42 units long. From B to D, that segment is 42 units long. Well, it's clear from the way I've done this picture that BD, which is 42 units long, is a total of 3X, this 2X and that 1X. So 3X equals 42, and then X equals 14, and then this is 28, 14, 14, it all adds up to 56. There were people who had this equation written down and did not have a picture that made it clear where this equation was coming from. Well, I know where it was coming from. It's coming from somebody else's paper. Okay, no, I'm sorry. You're not going to get credit for that. Okay. All right, I hope that's enough. If you have any more questions about it, arrange a one-on-one with me, okay?